Chet Huntley, NBC News, New York.
And David Brinkley, NBC News, Washington.
Israel today accepted the American plan for peace in the Middle East, a week after Egypt did, 5 days after Jordan. The plan includes a 90-day ceasefire on the Egyptian front, indirect negotiations, and an agreement to accept the United Nations Security Council resolution, providing that Israel give up occupied Arab lands. The Israeli government accepted the proposals in the face of bitter opposition by the Gahal party, which has 6 ministers in the cabinet, and which will decide on Monday whether to leave the government.
Having considered the appeals of the President of the United States, and while continuing its commitment to its basic policy guidelines and authorized statements, the government has decided to subscribe to the latest peace initiative of the government of the United States and to appoint, at the appropriate time, a representative for peace negotiation without prior conditions under the auspices of Ambassador Yaring within the framework of Security Council Resolution 242 and with the aim of reaching a binding contractual peace agreement.
We completely deny any repartition of Eretz Israel. We, of course, are for peace treaties in which the borders will be determined. And there are friends in the cabinet who do not accept our point of view and who contend that for peace, as it is called, for instance, the Gaza Strip must never be given to the Egyptians or Ramat HaGolan to the Syrians, which means that everybody in this cabinet knows that there may be decisions, concessions, for peace, so-called, which will make peace itself completely devoid of any contents.
The United Nations mediator, Gunnar Yaring, is scheduled to return to New York this Sunday. After being briefed on the formal replies from Egypt, Jordan, and Israel, Yaring will then work out a time, a place, and a format for the start of discussions with representatives from the 3 governments. The United States itself will undertake the major responsibility for implementing the ceasefire. It will be essentially self-policed. U.S. officials are not yet willing to discuss any details of supervision, such as possible reconnaissance flights, but they say those details are understood by all concerned. These officials are hopeful the ceasefire will become effective before long, but they leave open the possibility that it may not go into effect until after Yaring begins his delicate mission sometime next week. The procedures are of secondary importance. The real significance of the yes answer by the Arabs and the Israelis is that Egypt has now declared itself ready in principle to make a lasting peace with Israel, and Israel has now committed itself in principle to withdrawal from occupied territories. These are the most positive developments in the Middle East since the end of the June 1967 war. Richard Valeriani, NBC News at the State Department.
Now, we do not underestimate the difficulties which still lie ahead. The acceptance of the U.S. proposal by the governments principally concerned, important as it is only a first step. It will require moderation, flexibility, and a willingness by both sides to accept something less than their maximum positions if progress toward a just and lasting peace between the parties is to be made. But the ceasefire and the negotiations that now seem within reach are an essential beginning. In this connection, I want to reiterate one point, a point that I made last night in my press conference. It is an integral part of our ceasefire proposal that neither side is to use the ceasefire period to improve its military position in the area of the ceasefire lines. We still have a long way to go before we achieve the results that we hope can be achieved. But in a situation where a year and a half ago there seemed to be no hope, there now is some hope that a peaceful settlement can be arrived at.
Yasser Arafat, most powerful of the Arab guerrilla leaders, told thousands of demonstrators in Amman, Jordan, that the commandos will continue to fight Israel, liberate Palestine, and uproot the enemy from its soil. David?
The American plan was offered to both sides in the first place with the suggestion that they stop shooting and start talking. Well, now they have started one, but they have not stopped the other. The shooting went on. For the 71st day in a row, Israeli planes attacked Egypt along the canal, losing no planes, they said. There are reports, not substantiated, that 4 Egyptian planes shot down this week were flown by Russian pilots. Israel refuses to say what it knows about that, if it knows anything.
The Huntley-Brinkley Report is produced by NBC News and brought to you in color by Crest. Fighting cavities is the whole idea behind Crest.
There was a rock music festival scheduled this weekend at Powder Ridge near Middlefield, Connecticut, but the courts ordered it canceled and it'll not be held. But today, young people continued showing up anyway and seemed intent on staying. Even though there is no music and won't be, Powder Ridge seems to have become a kind of outdoor folk ritual or puberty rite, and a social scene offering a variety of fun and games.
There was so much coming and going in the Powder Ridge area today, it was difficult to tell whether the rock festival was beginning or ending. All roads to the ski resort were still blockaded, and only town residents were allowed to pass. Any cars parked on the highways were simply towed away. The young people had a problem: to stay or to go. Most of them had no place to go, so they stayed. But living wasn't easy, and worse, there was nothing to do. It was boring. It's a quiet festival, more like an overcrowded country picnic. The general feeling among the young people here is that the rock festival never should have been banned, but even more interesting is the fact that many of the state policemen agree with them. During the past couple of days, several of the troopers have been heard to remark, you know, they're really a nice bunch of kids. One self-styled hippie heard about the remark and said, you know, those straight guys aren't so bad. This is Liz Trotta, NBC News at Powder Ridge.
Another outdoor rock festival in Canada in a field east of Quebec, and so far the courts have let it alone. But the police have taken over a schoolhouse nearby and turned it into a command post, covering the blackboards with maps, charts, and operating plans in case they are needed. And in Los Angeles,
Charles Manson, described today by the star witness against him as the Messiah come again, the second coming of Christ. Linda Kasabian, who earlier had accused Manson of masterminding 7 murders, revealed that she thought Manson was Christ, that he generated love and pure truth, and that she had been in love with him. Defense attorney Paul Fitzgerald said, "Isn't it true Manson didn't care to have you near him?" There was no direct response to this first move by the defense to show that Mrs. Kasabian is testifying against Manson because he scorned her. At one point, prosecutor Vincent Bugliosi objected heatedly that Manson was coaching the defense attorney and that the jury could hear him. The jury was told to ignore Manson. Through the day, Mrs. Kasabian detailed her nomadic hippie life in 11 communes in 3 years, of indiscriminate sex, abundant drug use, and a search, she said, for love. Don Oliver, NBC News, Los Angeles.
The kind of hippie living that Mrs. Kasabian talked about has been part of the Berkeley scene for several years. Now the police there are trying to clean out Berkeley's crash pads, and particularly to rid the city of the teenagers who flock to them looking for thrills.
For the young, Berkeley is where it's at, so they come here from all over the world. They travel light. Many are runaways, some as young as 10 and 11. On the surface, it's a carefree scene. But in the crash pads, vacant houses taken over by the young nomads, it's often a different story. In this house, 3 teenage girls were drugged and assaulted by 5 men for 3 days. The girls were rescued by Berkeley police as part of a new crackdown on the city's summer population, a crackdown prompted by similar cases. Those over 18 are shown the city limits. Minors are picked up, their parents notified, and if the parents want them back, the youngsters are shipped home. Authorities say most of the runaways come from white middle-class families. More than 300 have been arrested so far, but hundreds more arrive every week. Tom Brokaw, NBC News, reporting.
Last year, senators who thought the Pentagon was spending vastly too much money tried to stop one of its new and expensive projects, the ABM system. They lost by 1 vote, and the building has begun. Now, the Pentagon is back for money to expend it. Senators Cooper of Kentucky and Hart of Michigan say now, today, they will try to cut off the money for any new ABM sites, leaving alone those already started, but trying to stop any new ones. Chet?
President Tew talked to his people again today on television and radio. And again, he told them he would not stand for a coalition government with the communists. And he repeated his opposition to a ceasefire because he said the enemy always violates even short truces. In Cambodia, the government of Premier Lon Nol was having difficulties on the battlefield, but nevertheless seemed to be consolidating its hold on the country.
When the Queen Mother, Prince Sihanouk's mother, was moved out of the royal palace this week, it marked another step toward the end of Cambodia as a kingdom. It also marked another successful step by the government of General Lon Nol to keep its balance on its way to proclaiming a republic. The balance is still precarious. South Vietnamese troops remain in Cambodia, and without them to lean on, the government would probably fall. But since American ground troops left the country 1 month ago, the Cambodians have shown they are not the pushovers many expected them to be. Military observers here are impressed by the Cambodians' willingness to fight, which is a measure of the country's nationalistic spirit. That same spirit is making it difficult for Vietnamese communists to organize Cambodians against the new government. The longer it takes the communists to organize, the longer the government has to strengthen its army and extend its own influence. So, while the government's balance is still unsteady, its footing is becoming more sure. While Cambodia has not won the war, it has not lost it either. Kenley Jones, NBC News, Phnom Penh.
Premier Kosygin said in Moscow last month, their talks with the Chinese about keeping peace on the border were making no progress, and it was all China's fault, he said. In the meantime, the Russians have moved several army divisions to the border. Today, the big Chinese papers ran the same editorial, quoting Chairman Mao and saying the Russians are planning to attack. We're moving in more troops, proving, the paper said, that Russian imperialism was as bad as American imperialism. The paper said, if they invade, we will bury them on the spot.
The Huntley-Brinkley Report continues, brought to you by Benjamin Moore Paints and your nearby Benjamin Moore paint dealer. The man to see for all your painting needs.
Dr. Edgar F. Berman is physician to Hubert Humphrey. Perhaps because of this, he wound up on 2 Democratic Party political committees looking for ways to win elections. Well, members of committees like this tend to talk a lot. Dr. Berman, in a burst of zeal, said he would oppose a woman president because, he said, there is a time in a woman's life when, because of glandular changes, she becomes somewhat emotional, unstable, and said he would not want a president making critical decisions while having what he called curious mental aberrations. Cooler heads on the committee suggested he quit immediately. The women members were furious. Today, Dr. Berman held a news conference.
Berman announced he is resigning from the Democratic Committee on National Priorities. He said he is quitting so his views will not embarrass the party or Humphrey, whom he called his best friend. Berman said some of his critics are seeking political advantage with women voters. He seemed astounded that his medical opinion caused such a political furor.
As a physician, I reiterate my scientific position that women are different physically, physiologically, and psychologically, regardless of politics, medical or otherwise. The difference, I think, is a credit to both sexes. If people do not know that there is such a condition as premenstrual tension, if doctors do not know, they'd better go back to school. If people do not know there is a abnormal psychologic condition known as menopause, then they'd better go back to medical school. They certainly know there's pregnancy. I've never said women are inferior to men. I've said they are different, and vive la différence.
The other day, Senator Scott, the Republican leader, said the Democratic Congress was spending July money to win November votes. And another Republican said the Democrats were spending money like drunken sailors. The Democratic leader, Mike Mansfield, says today that in some cases they have voted to spend more money than the president wanted, but in other cases they had voted less. And when they were through, he said, the president's budget would be cut, not expanded. These political arguments are familiar, but over the years it has turned out more often than not that Congress has voted to spend every dime the government had, plus a few more it did not. Chet?
2 weeks ago, 2 Chicago policemen were shot to death by snipers at a housing project. 4 suspects were arrested. Mayor Daley said he would spend $3 million on security and services at the project, Cabrini Homes, but black leaders say it's typical of all that's bad about low-income public housing.
These are the children of the Cabrini project. Most are fatherless, most are poor, and most of them have little hope for the future. This is Ensign Anthony Watson, who was born and raised in this project. He went away to the Annapolis Naval Academy, was class president twice and brigade commander. He's back in Chicago now on a temporary assignment, and he decided to live in Cabrini again. Watson says things have changed since he lived here as a boy, mostly for the worse.
It wasn't quite as complicated. It didn't seem to me as if it was a jungle as it does now. Now it's almost like walking through a patch in Vietnam, worrying about whether snipers will be coming down on you or not. You just don't know. Back in those days, way back when I was a little kid, we didn't have that type of pressure. We didn't have to worry about it. We didn't have any real large gang elements involved. And today we not only have gang elements, but we've got gang elements that are opposing each other. And consequently, people who aren't involved with either side get caught in the middle. It is like a jungle. You don't have to come in and tell the kids that they're poor. You don't have to come in and tell them that they don't have any food to eat, or they don't have any clothes to wear to school or to church on Sunday. You don't have to come in and tell them that they don't have a home to go to at night. They know that. They know that from the time that they're able to walk and talk. And they see the dope addicts, and they see the gang elements, and they see the prostitutes on the streets and in the buildings. They see all this type of thing, and this is their social atmosphere. This is something that they grow up in. This is something that they can't escape from, the ghetto, a situation from which they are not able to escape. I think one of our best approaches might be to concentrate on trying to give some opportunity to the young people, to give them some sign that there is a ray of hope left in Cabrini. So we have to give these people a taste of success, something that they might feel makes them a part of America, because I don't think they feel they are a part of America.
The nerve gas the Army plans to haul across the South and dump at sea is so deadly, anyone exposed at close range will die in 2 minutes. Exposure a mile away causes death in 2 hours. But the Army says that won't happen. Several congressmen, however, are worried about this hideous chemical being hauled through several states and put into the sea, and they have asked the Army to hold it up while they investigate. There was very little movement in the stock market today. Not much happened one way or another. The Dow Jones Industrials lost a fraction of a point. An average share on the New York Exchange lost 3 cents, and on the American, an average share gained 2 cents. Chet?
And so, this difficult moment is here. In leaving this post after almost 14 years, I recommend to you the NBC Nightly News, which begins tomorrow. It'll be in the most capable hands of David, John Chancellor, and Frank McGee. I'll be watching with interest and affection. I might also remind you that American journalism, all of it, is the best anywhere in the world. I want to thank the entire staff of NBC, for this nightly broadcast has not been an individual effort by any means. And as for you out there, I thank you first for your patience, then for your many kindnesses and the flattering things you have said and written. More difficult to take, to be sure, has been your criticism, but that too has been helpful and in most cases valid. But you have bolstered my conviction that this land contains an incredible quality and quantity of good common sense, and it's in no danger of being led down the primrose path by a journalist. At the risk of sounding presumptuous, I would say to all of you, be patient and have courage, for there will be better and happier news one day if we work at it. And David, thanks for these years of happy association and for being such an easy colleague to work with and for all the kindnesses.
Chet, I too would like to thank all of those who tune us in and put up with us, particularly including those who write the nasty letters. McGee and Chancellor and I will be here every night, and we'll miss you. Last night, NBC had a dinner for Chet and gave all of us a chance to say goodbye to him, and as a farewell gift, NBC gave him a horse. So, Chet, when you ride away to the west, to Montana, on your new horse, I will have to admit to at least a mild envy. And when you're out there under clear skies and clean air, maybe once in a while you will think of those of us still here, fighting the traffic, the transportation breakdowns, strikes, pollution, and wondering what is left that we can eat, drink, smoke, or breathe that will not kill us, and wondering what horror will be visited upon us next. In these years, I have often been stopped in public by people, always polite, who knew I was either Huntley or Brinkley, but weren't sure which, and so they would ask. Well, from now on, when somebody stops me in the street and says, "Aren't you Chet Huntley?" I have an answer. It is no, ma'am. He is the one out west on the horse. I really don't want to say it, but the time has come, and so for the last time, good luck and good night, Chet.
Good luck, David, and good night for NBC News.